Hey everyone, this is Steven Aguiar. I'm one of the co-founders of Endowment alongside Alicia Mall. When we launched Endowment a couple of days ago, we put out a pretty clear mission statement, and that's to help 100 nonprofits launch Web3 projects. We put out our launch email, got a lot of replies saying, hey, this is awesome, but what is Web3? So we wanted to record this video just to share a snapshot of how we're defining Web3, what we think it is, and ultimately how it will apply to your nonprofit. The first trend to keep in mind is the digitization of everything. This has been happening for 20 years since the internet was invented. There's this great Twitter thread from entrepreneur Shane Puri where he writes, "The metaverse is the moment in time where our digital life is worth more to us than our physical. This is not an overnight change or an investigation by some Steve Jobs type. It's a gradual change that's been happening for 20 years." And I think if you think about your day-to-day life, we spend so much of our time in front of computers on Zoom calls, texting our friends, on social media, playing video games, watching Netflix. Really, I'd say, I know for myself personally, a lot of our life is more digital in some ways than physical. And so that's really what the metaverse is and a big deal. So it's a big trend right now. It's a very trendy phrase. Facebook has just pivoted their whole name to Meta. But at the end of the day, it's just our digital life. And it doesn't mean it's a specific, you know, Microsoft Teams Hangout or anything like that with 3D avatars. It's really just our digital life overall that is really becoming as important, if not more important, than our physical life. And so Web3 is really the new internet of value that is enabled by the decentralized blockchain networks. If we're going to have a digital life, we need a way of validating digital ownership. And what blockchain networks do is they give a verifiable, secure way of owning a token that's not dependent on any one actor. We're not depending on just Facebook or just Microsoft or just Twitter to verify ownership of an asset. We have thousands of computers hosting a decentralized open network database, really, is what a blockchain is, but it's decentralized and hosted and backed up by thousands and thousands of computers that really create verifiable and secure digital assets. So taking a step back, Web 1 started as the read internet. So if you think about the first websites, AOL.com, Yahoo, even Amazon, which is obviously an extremely successful company, but really a Web 1 company. It was created in the late 90s. There was just, you go to a website and you would interact with it, and that was it. You would read articles, you would buy something, and that was pretty much it. Maybe you'd play a game. Then Web 2 came around in the late 2000s, first decade, the aughts, and that was really opened up sort of peer-to-peer, two-direction interactions and the right version of capability. So this is like social networks like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, where people now become content creators. They are also publishing on the platforms. They're interacting with each other on the platforms. And that's really defined the last 10 or so years of the internet. And now we see a new trend emerging, which is Web3. And with Web3, you can read, write, and now own, which is a huge breakthrough because it creates a whole new set of business models that we'll dive into a little bit later. But essentially now, through things like tokens and NFTs, you have verifiable digital ownership of assets. And now instead of the internet just being sort of a free flow of information where things like Wikipedia can scale very quickly and just free information gets out there and propagates, now we can create scarce digital resources that have caps. Bitcoin famously has a cap of 21 million. CryptoPunks, there's only 10,000 of them, and we can verify the scarcity of these assets online through the blockchain network. Web3 is not intended to wholly replace Web 2. Like I mentioned earlier, there are still very successful Web 1 companies around. Amazon is a Web 1 company, and it's the biggest company on earth. Web 3 is not going to disrupt all businesses. There's benefits to Web 3, and there's also drawbacks, and I think these are going to apply to different business models in different ways. One benefit of Web 3 is that it better incentivize alignment between users and shareholders. And so what I mean by this is, with a Web 3 business model, you can basically reward users for participating in the network. So imagine Facebook, right? Their shareholders want to run as many ads as possible, but the users don't like that because it reduces the experience. Imagine the Web3 version of Facebook where someone built that social network, and if advertisers did pay for ad space, instead of that revenue being recirculated to shareholders, it was actually recirculated to users. And users got to see that immediate benefit more than just shareholders. And maybe in that situation, users own their content and can custody their social posts and control their data and sell their posts and things like that. So it just creates better incentive alignment between users and shareholders. Number two, it's secure and reliable. And you self-custody your assets. Blockchain networks are very, very secure. Unless you're not careful with your seed phrase for your wallet, it's impossible to hack. So as long as you're responsible with how you manage your assets, they're really, really safe and reliably stored on these networks where there's, again, no one particular actor that is responsible for hosting the network. They're transparent and composable. All transactions that happen on blockchain networks are fully transparent and can be looked up. So while crypto is notoriously thought of as a place for money laundering on crypto is actually extremely difficult because there are breadcrumbs of every single transaction that happens. And by composable, everything again is transparent and open source, so people can basically take platforms and either build integrations on top or combine them and do cool things, where it really unlocks a lot of value across the platforms. And lastly, decentralized governance. There's been a lot of pushback on social networks in particular because it feels like there's one or two people in charge of these really big decisions on how these platforms are operated. And so with Web3, you generally have a decentralized governance, particularly through entities called DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, where everyone has a vote. You're able to propose changes to the network, and then everyone votes on it. So it would be governance through the community versus one centralized decision maker. Now, there are some drawbacks too. Number one, transactions are reversible. If you accidentally send Bitcoin to a wallet that doesn't exist, it's impossible to get back. There's no customer service team you can call to get that Bitcoin back. If you send an NFT to the wrong Ethereum wallet, you're not getting it back. There's no customer service, again, that you can call. So you have to be really careful with custodying your assets. And I think there's going to be a lot of improvement on this front in the future, but it's scary to have any sort of significant portion of your net worth on chain, meaning that it's being custodied on a blockchain network. Number two, they're slow and costly networks. If anyone's used Ethereum, you've probably interacted with very high gas fees, paying 10, 20, 30, 50, $100 just to do a transaction, just to buy a coin or send some token to a different wallet or buy an NFT. It's expensive. And really at the end of the day, more centralized alternatives like AWS from Amazon are faster and cheaper, but again, they're centralized, and we're reliant on Amazon for managing those networks and making the rules. So big drawback is slow and costly, although there are a lot of people working on making them faster and more efficient. And lastly, moderation is difficult. I think Facebook got a lot of pushback on how they sort of managed hate speech for a long time, for example. But ultimately, they do have thousands and thousands of people around the world moderating that content and removing things like hate speech from the network. With blockchain networks, they're free, open source, and permissionless. Anyone can interact with them without any gatekeepers. You don't need to have a bank account. You need to have an ID. You need to have an identity, really, in real life to create a wallet. So it becomes, moderation becomes difficult. How do you keep out bad actors? How do you reduce harmful content, things like that? Definitely something that, at the end of the day, a centralized company might be better at doing. Some business models, just to sort of give you some examples of business models that are ripe for Web3 disruption. One is art and IP. We've seen this in many extreme examples, one being Beeple. He worked on a piece for a long time and sold it for $69 million. That was covered a lot last year. But then, I just shared something in the ENDOWMºNT Discord yesterday about a DJ who was performing live and published the song that he was premiering as an NFT during his concert. and someone bought it for 1 Ethereum, or about $2,800 right now. So it's really creating a lot of value for artists. If you think about, if someone bought the masters for the Beatles, they might pay $1 million for that. I think we're going to see a lot of musicians and artists and things publish scarce collectibles through NFTs, and realize a lot of value from that. They're not going to just need to rely on merch, events, performances, and Spotify streams to get paid. Number 2 is membership and community. One of my favorite examples of this is LinksDAO. They're basically a membership community, a golf membership community, where you have to own the NFT to be a part of it. And eventually their goal is to use the funds raised from the NFT and others places to buy a golf course. And if you own the NFT, you will be able to purchase a real membership into this golf course. You also see this with things like CryptoPunks, where people who own those now have formed a community where they interact with each other. They share tips and resources on trading and investing and things like that. And really, that art of the CryptoPunk has become a membership pass into this community. Next one I have listed here is venture capital. I think we're just going to see a lot of new ways capital. We're already seeing it. New ways in which capital is formed and invested, especially again through DAOs. People are basically able to pool together their money, manage it collectively, basically spread out their tentacles, find investment opportunities, vote on them together. And venture capital, Silicon Valley, is not going to be the only game in town when it comes to seeding new businesses. And I think Web3 is going to enable a lot of disruption and accessibility to capital, which is going to be great. Financial services is a huge one, obviously. If you haven't heard of DeFi, decentralized finance, Google that and check out what's going on there. But these are basically financial services where you can deposit collateral and borrow against it permissionlessly, quickly. You don't have to do days and days of back and forth to the bank to take a loan out. You can do it in 5 minutes through a service like Aave. There's platforms like Uniswap where people are able to create tokens and trade them on a decentralized exchange. You don't have to worry about Coinbase approving your token to be traded on the exchange. You can just do it on your own if you want. So there's going to be a lot happening in financial services that's going to make it much more permissionless, much more open, and give people access to a lot of opportunities like loans and opportunities to make markets for different assets without having to rely on centralized gatekeepers to do that. Video games is big. I think a lot of people use the example of skins in video games, like in Fortnite. If you earn a rare item in a video game and it was an NFT, you'd be able to sell it on the open market versus only realizing value of that NFT within the game. So there's going to be a lot happening on the video game front. And lastly, and most importantly for this audience, fundraising and activism. We're going to go through a bunch of examples of how nonprofits are already using Web3 technology to create value, to fundraise, to organize their community. And we'll look at a few of those now. The first one we really like is Women Rise. This was founded by artist Maliha Abidi. I think in November of last year it first dropped. And it's 10,000 randomly generated and unique NFT art pieces that serve as profile photos. They did $7.4 million in trading volume, with 7.5% of those fees going to women-centered orgs like the Malala Fund, the PAD Project, and SOLA Afghanistan. So there was a sort of social good element connected to the project directly. And basically they're trying to build, a metaverse for women's education. And now, the mint for this project, I think, was 0.07 ETH. And now if you want to buy one, you have to pay 4, 5, 6 times that to buy one. So really the first investors were able to support the project, make a profit on their investment, support nonprofits, and now Women Rise is basically a sustaining project that Maliha can work on full time. So a lot of the value, again, was realized by the community together in a way different way than a centralized membership business would look like. Artbox is a really popular NFT series, and basically every creator that worked with Artbox was able to choose a nonprofit that would receive a percentage of the funds of their project. One example is Rich Lord's Geometry Runners, which you can see over here. It's a static image. It's actually a motion, 3D motion series, but they raised 3.4 million for Information Technology and Innovation Foundation and the Coalition for Rainforest Nations. So basically, a lot of money was basically raised on the back end of this art series for a lot of great nonprofits. This one came from News Story, which is one of my personal favorites, just because it's so simple and direct. But basically, News Story, their mission is to alleviate homelessness around the world. They published 20 NFTs, each selling for 2 Ethereum, about $5,000 or $6,000 in today's price. And you would basically own this NFT, this token, in your wallet, but the funds for that purchase went directly to building homes in Mexico and El Salvador. So it's cool for the donor because now they have this receipt, this piece of art that represents their support of the organization, and they always have this sort of memento of this moment and be part of this community of News Story. And if anyone ever wants to buy it from them, some of those transaction fees would again go back to News Story, which is great. What's next? We don't know. We just want to sort of give a snapshot of where we think Web3 is right now. We think there's a lot of exciting things happening in the space. Again, it's not perfect, but we have a big opportunity to shape where it's going to go and how we can use it in the nonprofit space, the fundraise and organize. And we look forward to seeing you in the Discord, on our newsletter, and elsewhere in the near future. Thanks.